Most people think decisions happen at the moment of choice. But in the brain, the process begins much earlier because before there's a decision, there is a brain state. And I do not mean state in the self-help, fluffy kind of sense. So it's not confidence or motivation or mindset or being in flow. I mean a brain state in the neuroscientific sense. So a moment-to-moment configuration of neural activity and connectivity, obviously in the brain, meaning which systems are active, how strongly they're communicating with each other, how stable or flexible those patterns are, and how the brain is transitioning from one configuration to another. That state affects cognitive processes: attention, working memory, memory retrieval, inhibition, reasoning, valuation, emotion, and those cognitive processes shape the decision that eventually becomes visible. So the decision is not the beginning of the process, it's the visible output of an invisible cascade. Brain state, cognitive processes, decision. That is the iceberg. The decision is above the waterline. Everything that produced it is not. Hi, I'm Gwen Bach. I have a master's degree in applied neuroscience, and I'm the founder of Applied Brain Lab, where we study how modern environments shape decision-making in ambitious professionals and business owners. In this video, I want to explain why decisions are not isolated acts of logic or willpower. They are the behavioral expression of a deeper process. And once you understand that process, you stop asking, why did I make that choice? And you start asking better questions, like, what kind of brain state was present? What cognitive processes did that support? Which ones were limited or distorted? And what decision became more likely as a result? So let's define the first layer carefully. A brain state is not a mood label, as I said before. It's not just being focused or stressed or motivated. In neuroscience, a brain state refers to a recurring or momentary pattern of neural activity and connectivity, and it describes the brain's current operating mode. You can think of it as the biological condition of the system doing the cognitive work. Researchers study this in different ways. With EEG, they can examine very brief patterns of electrical activity, sometimes called microstates, which last for milliseconds. With fMRI, they study slower patterns of whole brain connectivity, meaning how large-scale networks are communicating over time. The methods differ, but the central finding is the same. The brain is not static. It moves constantly through configurations, and those configurations affect how information is processed. The second layer is cognitive processing. So cognitive processing refers to the mental operations the brain uses to work with information. And these are not abstract ideas, they're specific studyable functions. Attention is the process that selects what information enters conscious processing. Working memory is the system that holds information actively in mind and manipulates it, and it has limited capacity, which matters enormously. Memory retrieval brings up relevant knowledge and past experience. Inhibition suppresses an immediate or reactive response so that a more considered one can form. And reasoning compares evidence, rules, and consequences. Valuation estimates what is rewarding, what is costly, and what is worth pursuing. And emotion functions as a prioritization signal, flagging what is threatening, urgent, or meaningful to you. These processes depend on neural systems, and those systems operate differently depending on the current brain state. So the brain state does not directly cause a decision in a simple mechanistic way. It shapes the cognitive conditions from which the decision emerges. The third layer is the decision itself. a selection from available options under biological, cognitive, and contextual restraints. It might be obvious, saying yes to hiring someone, changing the plan, or it might be less visible, like delaying, avoiding, choosing not to choose yet. Both are outputs. Both are shaped by what happened underneath. Now, here's why this matters practically. We tend to over-interpret decisions and under-examine the conditions that produce the decision. Someone avoids a difficult conversation and we say they are conflict avoidant. Or somebody reacts sharply and we say they're irrational. Someone delays and we diagnose them as lack of confidence. Sometimes those interpretations capture part of the pattern, but often they're just incomplete because the very same person can make a different decision when the cascade changes. Imagine someone needs to make a complex decision at work, say approving a project or responding to criticism, choosing between two strategic directions. If they approach it after a full night's rest, with enough time and low social pressure, the brain's operating conditions supports broader processing. Attention can be allocated, working memory can hold multiple variables, and inhibition can suppress the first reactive response. Long-term consequences are easier to represent and weigh. Now take the same person, the same decision after a bad night's sleep, high workload, time pressure, so attention narrows, working memory is overloaded, and only the most salient information gets processed. The most vivid or most recent memory carries disproportionate weight. Long-term consequences become harder to hold in mind because the cognitive resources required to simulate the future are the same resources currently being consumed by the cognitive load, and the same person may avoid the decision, defend their position, or choose whatever reduces immediate discomfort. The person has not become a different person, but the cascade has changed. And that is fundamentally a different explanation than personality. This also explains why giving people more information does not always improve decisions. More information helps when the cognitive system is in a condition to process it, specifically when attention can be directed to it, when working memory has the capacity to hold it alongside other variables, and when reasoning can integrate it with existing knowledge. But if somebody's overloaded, fatigued, more information becomes just more noise. The bottleneck is not the data, it's the cognitive capacity available to use that data. So the question is not only whether somebody has the right information, it is whether the current brain state supports the kind of cognitive processing that decision actually requires. Those are different problems. They need different solutions. And that is where the practical shift happens. Most decision advice starts too late. It starts at the level of the visible decisions, like make better choices, think long term, be more rational. And some of that is useful, but only if you work at the level of the decision. You are working at the surface level. The more precise point to start is earlier in the cascade. So before asking what you should decide, ask what kind of cognitive processing this decision requires. Does it require sustained attention? Then protect attention. Or does it need working memory capacity? Then the information load needs to be managed. Does it require reasoning about long-term consequences? Then fatigue and time pressure are directly biologically relevant. These are not soft factors: timing, sleep, recovery, task sequence, cognitive load, environmental noise, information structure, time pressure. These conditions change the state of the system doing your thinking. And when the state changes, the processing changes. And when the processing changes, the decision can change. And that is not a motivational claim. It is how the system, the brain, works. So the central idea here is decisions are visible. The cascade that produces them is not. Before a decision becomes behavior, the brain is already operating in a particular state, and that state shapes cognitive processing. That processing shapes what is noticed, held, retrieved, weighted, inhibited, compared, and acted upon. And from that, a decision emerges. Decisions do not begin at the moment when you make it. They begin earlier in the state of the system doing the choosing. And if you want to understand why decisions go the way they go, you cannot only look at the choice. You have to look at what is underneath. That is what we work on here. By the way, if you want to explore this in more depth in a one-on-one consultation with me, there's a link for this below. So I'll see you in the next video.